Domas, and thank you all for having me. As Dr. Domas mentioned, I'm Tara Dunn, and I'm the Dean of Students here at Northwest. Just to give you a little brief kind of brainchild on how Project Gateway came to be, when the opportunity for the to write a grant came to be, I wanted to make sure that we were able to address some of the needs of our students. The Women's Foundation of Mississippi is the sponsor for Project Gateway. Just to let you know a little bit about the Women's Foundation of Mississippi, they create social change via grant making and advocacy and action in the areas of planned pregnancy, education, and careers. This past grant cycle, the Women's Foundation was able to grant, I believe it was $670,000 in grants to nonprofit organizations as well as community colleges. And of course, Northwest is one of those recipients through Project Gateway. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about what Project Gateway is, some of the students who we're wanting to target, and what some of the true goals for Project Gateway is. This is a very candid conversation, so if at any time that you have questions, please feel free to raise your hand, and of course we will address those questions as needed. So, Project Gateway, how many of you have heard of it? Maybe through conversations. Can anybody just tell me a brief description of what you believe Project Gateway is or what you've heard about it? Maybe? If I can pick on Ms. Carrera.
Benefit women students
Yes.
that have financial needs.
Sure, that's exactly it. To sum it up, women who are, of course, Northwest students who have reached some type of financial hardship, this grant is geared towards them. What we're wanting to do is help students with their tuition, with their room and board, and I may be in y'all's way, so I'm going to step over here. Help students with their tuition, their room and board, if they need help with books, but also to help them with career readiness. If the student is, for instance, at the end of their nursing program and they need to take their comprehensive exams, or if they need scrubs or things of that nature, the grant is to make sure that we can help them get to the point that they need to be, whether it's in their educational endeavors or whether it's in their career endeavors, and they need that extra financial push. This grant, of course, can help them get there. The beauty about where we are now is that we've started the grant this semester. Last semester was used mainly for planning purposes. However, we're actually accepting applications and we are granting funds to students this semester. Just to give you some examples of some of the things that we've done to help students, just this morning we had some students who were in the coding program at the DeSoto Center. Those students needed some help paying for the, I believe there's an organization that goes along with the coding department, and they also have a test that they have to take. We were able to pay for their organization membership, and we were also able to pay for the testing that they need to take in order to get their certification. Some of the other things that we've done, we had a student who was here maybe 2 semesters ago who had some bad debt to the college. I believe the student owed about $1,200, and so our grant was able to be used for that student because the student received Pell Grant for this semester, but they had to make sure that that debt was paid before they were able to register again. So we were able to pay for that bad debt so the student, of course, could move forward with their education this semester. So those are just 2 examples of students that we've been able to help this semester, and I'm sure that by the end of the semester we'll have plenty of more stories to tell. As mentioned, some of the supplementary goals of Project Gateway is to increase uninterrupted full-time status for Northwest students. We're wanting our students to stay in class. We want to make sure that when they're in class that they're ready to attend. So I know that some of you may have had students who have been in class, but maybe they didn't have the money to buy their books. And of course, as you know, if they don't have the books, then they are not academically ready, they're not classroom ready. So we want to make sure that if there's any student or any woman student out there that is in that particular area where they cannot purchase books, that when they come to the first day of class, they have everything that they need to be successful. There's 2 aspects of the grant. Not only are we giving them funds, but we're also partnering students up with a mentor. So if a grant recipient, of course, if we have a student who is a grant recipient, we also partner them up with a mentor. Depending on the campus that they're in, we have about 4 mentors here on the Senatobia campus, and there are a few at the DeSoto and the Oxford Center. So again, we're wanting to make sure that they have those mentor networks, because as we know, those things are important as they move forward in their career. The grant is administered by the Dean of Students Office. We have a committee that is made up of a faculty member and a financial aid advisor. Our faculty member is Ms. Rebecca Allen, and she is at the DeSoto Center. And our financial aid advisor is Mr. Stephen Bennett, who is at the Oxford Center. And we're going to talk about how important that is when we look at the handout in just a second. I wanted to show you how the application process worked, but the internet isn't working. So I'll kind of tell you about what the application process is like. If you go to the Northwest website, under the staff forms, the 4th link to the bottom is the Project Gateway application, and the one right next to it is the Project Gateway recommendation form. If you know that there's a student who is in need of funds to help them this semester, you can go online and print out the application and the recommendation form to give to the student. The application form is very generic. We're asking basic questions about the student, but very specifically, we're wanting to know what are they requesting funds for. So for instance, if a student is needing help with books, we're wanting them to actually go and find out how much those books are and put that specifically on there. I'm requesting books, and this is the amount of those books.
Could they request help with the applications for transferring?
Yes, such as the fees.
Yes.
Yes, that's a great one. If a student is interested in going to another institution, or if they need any type of testing fees, application fees, things of that nature, that is definitely something that we're able to help with. Yes, that's a great example. So again, make sure that they put that on there and put the amount that the test or the books is. And the committee does reserve the right to either grant the full amount of what they're requesting or have an abbreviated amount. And we'll kind of refer to the sheet and talk a little more in detail on that. There's also a recommendation form. The recommendation form is for you. That's for you to complete to speak on behalf of the student. Again, you have a little bit more closer contact with the student than we do as a committee. And if you can vouch for this student's situation, that would be very helpful. And any additional information that you want to provide, we use that information as we make a decision on if the student will be a grant recipient. There's some supplemental questions that the student has to complete. And it's really just for us to gauge where they are in their academic career and how this grant will be able to help them later on. But again, there's about 4 questions. The students will have to answer those questions on a separate sheet of paper. So when they turn in their form, they should have the application, the supplemental questions, and the recommendation form from you. Any questions on that? So each of you have a Project Gateway General Information form. Some of the information that's on here we've already discussed, but there are some very specifics that I think is very necessary for you as potential recommenders of people for the grant. We've already talked about who the committee is, but know that some of the things that the committee is looking for is kind of the, how can I put this, the determination if they're going to get the grant. So even though different students' situation is different, every situation is different of each student, we are all going to be making sure that we look at their financial aid status. If you know of a student that's in need, the first question that you should ask is, have they completed a FAFSA? Because that FAFSA is going to be used for us to be able to check their default status. We're going to be checking their GPA, their cost of attendance, their lifetime eligibility unit, because all of those factors, of course, will determine the true need of the student's request for the money. Okay, so that will help us out a whole lot. If you ask them, have they done a FAFSA, because that will be some of the things that we'll be checking for their financial status. Of course, the second criteria is your employee statement of support, which is that recommendation form. And then, of course, the third criteria is the application, the student goals. So we're going to be reviewing those questions. But one of the things that has been a deterrent from students from actually receiving the grant is their true financial aid status. A lot of students are applying for the grant, but they haven't exhausted all of their options. And loans are a financial aid option. So we have been kind of doing that by case. If a student, for instance, has a family and they have already taken out a certain amount of loans from a previous degree, that is something that we consider if we actually give them the grant funds, or if we tell them that you may want to continue to exhaust the options of the loans. Now, for a student who is a second-year student who just doesn't want to do loans, but they are eligible for them, we would encourage them to do those loans first, because we want to maximize the grant money for those who have exhausted those options. Any questions on that?
How much do you have allocated per year? I mean,
So it's $50,000 for the 2-year span. And for each student, a student can apply for up to $1,500 per semester for up to 2 semesters. Yes, ma'am.
Is this available to out-of-state students?
Yes, ma'am. It's available to any Northwest student. Well, any Northwest female student.
Okay.
Any questions on anything we talked about on the front page? If we turn over to the second page, let's look at that standard for decision making. Now, of course, with our very interesting start to the semester, our 2 to 3 day business day decision making was a little bit off, but we are trying to, as students submit their application, we're trying to get a turnaround in 2 to 3 days. What we're doing is, if I receive the application at the Senatobia campus, someone at the DeSoto Center, it also has to review it, and of course the committee member at the Oxford Center. I'll use Stephen for example. Stephen is very busy because he's the only financial aid person at the Oxford Center. So sometimes that may be a little bit delayed on the 2 to 3 business days, but we're trying to get things turned over as quickly as possible. We give a special consideration for students who are 1 year or less from completing their degree. Students who are a freshman, for instance, a first semester freshman, that would not be a student that we would readily, give grant funds to, because what we don't want to do is start a student off receiving grants, but then can't help them fulfill the degree. So because the grant is only allowed for the student to have for 2 semesters, my question would be to the student is, how do you plan to pay for school for your next year? So again, we're really wanting to focus on students who are close to graduation. However, we do everything by case, and there may be an unforeseen reason that the student may only need the funds for 1 semester, and then things will be back on track the next semester. If that's the case, of course, that would be something that they need to include in those supplemental questions. And if that's something that you are aware of as well, that's something that you can include in your recommendation. We realize that student situations are not always black and white, and as much color as you can add to the application process, the easier it is for us to truly get a depiction on what that student's situation is. The dispersal of funds, once we give the students information, depending on what they are actually receiving, will determine how we disperse those funds. If they are receiving tuition, room, or board, then we put that money onto that account. If the student is receiving books, they receive a voucher from us to go to the bookstore to pay for those funds. And then, of course, if they're paying for a test or something that is outside of Northwest, we use the foundation credit card to pay for that, and that's something that we just have to make some type of arrangements to do. So again, we try to do everything that we can for the student, but again, we can't help everyone, but as much as we can for the students who meet the criteria that's listed, we're trying to grant those funds as quickly as possible. So I hope that gave you a general overview of what Project Gateway is and its true purpose. Are there any questions that you all have, or things that I may have missed that you need some more clarity on?
How many students do you have enrolled in the program right now?
Right now, we've helped about 6 students, and we've denied 2.
And the average grant period of these students is about how much?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, the average amount of money given to students is about how much?
So it varies because we've had about 3 students who've only requested for organization membership, and that organization membership was only about $110 individually. However, we've had students, at least 2 who've asked for tuition, and so that's about, is it 1,200 or, varying if it was a nursing student. So that's pretty much been the average. It's kind of varied depending on the need.
Do you have any mentors in the faculty mentors on our campus?
Not faculty, we have staff.
Yeah.
Yes. Miss Steele is one, and I don't think she's considered faculty, but I think she's considered staff. Can't think of Miss Steele's first name. Rhonda. So I guess that may be more of administrator. But if anyone is interested in being a mentor, we can definitely sign you up. What the mentors are responsible for is the Women's Foundation is really much so an advocate for knowing exactly what a student's situation is prior to the funds being received and how that has helped the student matriculate through their education and beyond. And so what the mentors do, of course, not only are they here to help connect with resources on the campus, but also to encourage students to do the surveys that are associated with the grant. The students have to complete a pre-survey, a post-survey, and a 6-month post-survey. So that does require for them to kind of keep in contact with the student, which we hope that relationship is being formed while they're here. But we ask that the mentors meet with them at least 3 times a semester, just to kind of gauge where they are, see if there's any additional help that they may need, and to identify services that the student could receive while they're here. Do y'all know of any students who may be able to receive some funds?
I had a particular situation last semester, which I think students would probably benefited by this. She was a band student, and of course then that paid for room and board and tuition, but she was unable to buy a book for my class that was needed. The whole semester she was in there without the book. No internet access to do her assignments, and I think originally her parents were supposed to help with books, but that didn't work out, and so it's just a really awful situation. So that would be the situation I could refer to this.
Yes, that would be a perfect situation. And I mentioned to you earlier about the color pieces that go into the decision making. I'm not sure if you all are aware, but for financial aid with the students' FAFSA, they're looking at the taxes from 2015. Well, of course, with it being 2018 now, a lot of students' income situation has changed. Now, because we are basing everything off of their financial aid status, when we first look at that student, we may say, well, hey, things are fine for you. However, situations change very quickly, especially financially. And if that student has had a change in the household, if, say for instance, mom has lost her job and mom was initially paying for tuition, or maybe there was an addition to the family, those are things that we would like for you all to include in the application. Because once we look at it, the financial aid status of it is so important. We want to make sure that we're considering what the situations or how someone's family situation may have changed that could be impacting their education.
So dealing with a situation like that, you talked about exhausting all other resources first.
Yes.
So since this is a grant and it's technically foundation, coming from foundation, would the other book scholarship from foundation, the textbook assistant program, be something that we would go to first before we hit Project Gateway? Because I refer people to that every semester.
Yes, so you can, even though the foundation is kind of the holding spot for the grant, is very separate from the textbook assistance, if that makes sense. So yes, we would encourage you to use textbook assistance, but we do know that those funds are limited as well. So Patty and I have a really good relationship with kind of talking about what the student has and what they need. And she may say, well, hey, we just don't have any more money left. Project Gateway would be a perfect time for them to apply.
So we could bypass that one. I mean, we had gone through that last semester. I think she may have applied for
The
textbook
textbook
assistance too late.
Yes, ma'am. And I think there's a small window that you have to apply for those funds. So again, Project Gateway is a good supplement for when those funds aren't available.
When are y'all accepting applications for, let's say, next semester? Because I do have a female that told me yesterday, she's from Missouri.
Yes, ma'am.
Her parents called her home this weekend to tell her that she's gonna have to start paying for her school. She's got one more year
Okay.
because they've got to file bankruptcy.
Oh, wow.
So she's at a situation that she doesn't know if she wants to finish because she has to pay for it. Are y'all accepting for next semester that she could go ahead and apply, or?
We are, however, if she applies for next semester, we would encourage her to go ahead and submit her FAFSA
Yes.
for 18 and 19 first. Because again, a lot of the information that we're going to be gauging, Stephen is really integral in this process because he can see, he can foresee what type of aid they may be
Yes.
getting. And, but first they need to make sure that they have that FAFSA,
Yeah, I'll make sure.
at least on file.
Mhm.
But yes, we would encourage her to go ahead and apply. FAFSA first, then Project Gateway. And of course, the funds won't be applied to her account until she actually registers for classes. Great questions too. When you all give me dialogue, it helps me to also kind of consider some of the things that we have initially set out for, but things we may need to kind of consider as we continue to matriculate through the grant process.
How do you make sure the money, like if I have a student who needs an application fee paid for Mississippi State, you know, and it's $100 or whatever, do you pay for the application or do you give them $100 and expect them to pay for the application?
No. We are not giving any funds to students.
Okay.
So I'll use, for example, the organization fee that we paid today. We had 3 students, like I said, who were on the DeSoto campus who needed this organization fee paid for. What we did is they created their login, and I told them, with the help of Rebecca, because she was kind of facilitating it, what we told them is that we're going to have to log into that account to pay the fee, and I did that in the foundation office and printed the receipts from it, and then told them, hey, now that everything is done, you go back in and change your password. Yes. Because most things have to do things with logins. Another way that we can do it, of course, is we can pay it directly to the entity if there isn't a login type situation. If it's a test that you can call the place and pay for it and say this is for this particular student, we do it that way too. But we're never giving money to the student.
Smart.
Yes.
So this is a 2-year grant. So are you in the process of writing again to?
Well, no, the grant cycle just began for this upcoming year. And what the way it works is, and I failed to mention this very important part. So the grant is $50,000. We endowed $15,000 with the foundation. So after these funds are completed, hopefully that money will be gaining interest and we'll be able to still pull from those funds in years to come. Now, we also hope to apply for these funds again after our cycle is complete. So it will have to be next year. We applied for it in 2017, so we won't be eligible to apply for it again until 2019. Any other questions? I did not mention this in the beginning, but my office is located in Tate Hall. If there's a student that you are not too sure about, you don't know if this will be a student who would be considered, and you want to actually send that student to come and talk to me, I'm right next to Mr. Smith's office, so they can always come in that door or through the Campus Life and Housing door, and again, just ask to speak to Ms. Dunn. I'll be more than happy to have a conversation with them. And if there's anything that I can do for you all, the same applies. So again, located in Tate Hall, and I also have a few cards with me as well, so you can get my contact information. Or you could just look it up on Outlook, whichever.
Yeah.
I just thought about this, like a card may not be necessary. I'll save the paper, so. Is there anything else that I can do for you or any questions that you have? All right, well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.